Good evening. The 42nd meeting of the 22nd Council will come to order. All councilors are expected to be present this evening. It's like Councilor Winter might be a little bit late. Oh, there he is, right on time, right on cue. We will get started with the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence first. And as we begin this evening's meeting, I'd like to ask you to join me in a 60-second moment of silence, remembering the 59 people who died and the more than 500 who were wounded in the tragic and senseless shooting in Las Vegas, as well as the millions of people in Puerto Rico still suffering from the devastation caused by Hurricane Maria. Please keep them in your thoughts and prayers.
Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Civic Plaza parking passes are provided for members of the public. You can obtain a parking pass from council staff at the sign-up table. The council will take a break at approximately 7 o'clock this evening. We do not have any proclamations or presentations tonight. We do have an economic development discussion from Ms. Dorian Rader regarding the Tech Navigators program. Ms. Rader.
Good evening, Chairman, councilors. My name is Dorian Rader. Thank you for allowing me a few minutes to speak tonight. I'm the Vice President of the New Mexico Angels, which is our local angel investment group. We work to invest in high-tech companies in New Mexico. I'm also Executive Director of New Mexico Startup Factory, which is a spinoff we created to commercialize technologies out of the national labs and universities. But what brings me here tonight is a program we just started called Tech Navigator. So as you know, in the past years, there's been great investment by the city and the community in our entrepreneurial infrastructure and market. This has led to the creation of a plethora of resources. The Tech Navigator program is a strategic guiding program designed to assist scientists and entrepreneurs in navigating those resources available, with the goal of bringing their technologies to market and commercializing. However, the partnership involved is what makes this so revolutionary. For the first time in the city's and the state's history, we've brought together all of the national labs, universities, and a number of entrepreneurial support organizations, as well as private investors. We're working collectively on a single goal, which is commercializing technology. Our team includes City Alive by way of Living Cities, the City of Albuquerque, Air Force Research Laboratory, the University of New Mexico's Innovation Academy, as well as STC.UNM, Sandia National Laboratories, Los Alamos National Laboratory, and many entrepreneurial organizations, including Innovate ABQ, the Bioscience Center, FatPipe, the New Mexico Angels, New Mexico Startup Factory, ABQID, STC.UNM, and the Business and Intellectual Property Law Practice of Ayala. So in this program, I'm acting as the navigator, in which I take scientists and entrepreneurs and help them find the resources that are best for them. Our team will also be launching the Tech Navigator Challenge in the spring, which is a program at the University of New Mexico that also includes CNM, where AFRL, Sandia, and UNM will all be giving technologies to these students so they can work on commercialization. So we're essentially trying to teach the next generation how to commercialize these technologies. They'll be mentored by entrepreneurs in the community as well as investors, with the goal, again, of creating high-tech companies. As you can see, with so much cross-organizational support, we believe this to be a long-term mission for us, and we thank you for your continued support.
Thank you. Exciting program. So we'll move on now to the administration Q&A period. Councilors, any questions for the administration?
Got
guys are off the hook tonight, I guess. For now. Oh, no, see, we missed that window. Councilor Harris.
Yes, thank you. I guess probably for Mr. Reardon or Mr. Perry, there's been some information which I think is incorrect, but maybe we could tell people in terms of the ART funding and the full funding agreement. I think we're. I talked to our lobbyists in Washington. I understand we're on track, but and it's taking longer than I would prefer. But tell me what you know to clear this up for folks.
Mr. President, Councilor Harris, thanks for the question. So we met with FTA last week as part of our quarterly meetings with this. The Small Starts Grant Agreement is right on track. What happened is they have now gotten their director in place of FTA, so she wanted to have time to review all the grant agreements that are coming through. So it's going to take about a month longer than we originally wanted it to, but they are still shooting for early to mid-November, but no later than late November to have our Small Starts Grant Agreement in place. The funding again is dedicated; it's there, it's waiting for it. It's filling out the application to get the money to us, or the grant portion of it. So we have all of our documents turned in. FTA Region 6 is reviewing those. They gave us a thumbs up last week that all of our documents are in place. They're sending it to their national representative, and then the director wanted 30 days to look at most of these.
And what about, I'm hoping it's a red herring, but tell me if it's not, the issue that the federal fiscal year is about to end and somehow or it did end and now everything's at risk. Is there any truth to that?
Mr. President and Councilor Harris, no, there's not. We asked that question specifically. What that federal year is for is for funding to be utilized. It's not that the funding, if you get a grant agreement after that date, you're still within it. It's a programmatic thing. It's similar to our GEO bond program. We're going to get funds that were programmed in 2015 that we still have on the books right now, and we get to use them. So it's programmed. It's there. It won't go away. It's just a matter of getting the Small Starts Grant Agreement signed. And again, we've turned in all of our documents for that, and we've gotten the verbal and a physical thumbs up so far. Just waiting on a new director as part of the new administration to get us our grant agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Reardon.
Councilor Pena.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but I just actually want to thank everybody congratulate everybody on council this evening who won last night. And then just to really add something that, I found very interesting. As you all know, a lot of us listen into KNW 89.1, and I appreciate their reporting on the elections. But there was something stated last night that I just really wanted to try to maybe not provide commentary on. Is just that, I know we all have differing views, and I just really want to say that, for my first term, I really appreciate working with everyone. I consider you all to be doing what's in the best interest of your communities, and it was stated that, council hasn't done anything as a whole, and I really think that, I want to just congratulate you guys, because I really think that you've done a lot of work to address some of these issues that we have in our community, and it's tough to try to get 8 people on the same page, but I really appreciate the relationship this first 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Pena. And yeah, I think you're referring to some comments that were made on the radio that basically essentially described the council as chopped liver and not very effective and not very exciting. And maybe we're not exciting enough by, we're not brawling out in the lobby, and we're not, there's some people laughing. Know what that's about. We're not brawling out in the lobby, and we're not necessarily brawling for brawling's sake with the mayor and the administration. I've found this council to be hardworking and collaborative. We've done some very important work. Vice President Winter and former Councilor Garduno and sponsoring and everybody involved in the overhaul of the police oversight ordinance. Very important work, but maybe not that sexy, I guess, to some people. But yeah, it takes all of us on here to get things done, and it takes collaboration, and I share those sentiments, Councilor Pena. And I did mean to say congratulations for those who were reelected last night, Councilor Sanchez, Councilor Gibson, Councilor Pena, and Councilor Harris. And we look forward to continue to working with you. And congratulations to Councilor Lewis for his making the runoff election. So, and thanks to everybody for coming out to vote. We got a good turnout, and that's always good to see the engagement of the community in these important decisions. So, Councilor, was there a follow-up?
Sure. I know that Councilor Gibson also had her hand up, but I'll go ahead. Yeah, I think I was on the, but, yeah, I mean, I put my hand up before she did the second time, but under a rule, she's supposed to go first, not me. But anyway, I'll just go forward since I have the mic on. But in any case, yeah, I think I was on the radio last time. I forget who I was talking to, but and one thing that I often say is that, you know, most of the work that we do, I mean, 95% of it is getting along and working together to get stuff done. And I make the analogy of kind of like a playground. When everyone's playing well together, there's no issues and no one pays any attention to that. But if there's ever like a little squabble in the playground, then people gather around and say, look at that. And that's kind of like what we do up here. It's a lot of collaboration, a lot of hard work, a lot of getting things done in a very collaborative way, a very successful way. And also, I just want to kind of joke that Councilor Sanchez used to talk about the memorial for the 7 councilors who voted for art. Well, I guess we're not going to need it, but anyway, so we all got through, and we're all going to keep working together, and I just want to thank everybody for giving me the chance at least.
Councilor Gibson is next.
I just wanted to suggest that we could all become a lot more entertaining if we all had blogs.
I don't know how to do that, sorry.
Neither do they.
Councilor Sanchez.
Councilor Harris, the art project is still not completed. There still could be that potential of a memorial park for the 7 councilors that did support the art project.
I think the joke was that
Right.
Councilor Sanchez and I did not want to be buried under that lane. Councilor Davis.
To that end, Mr. President, I do have a question for the administration, but I do want to extend my congratulations to all of our counselors who did that. It is an incredibly hard job to do that work, especially while you're also serving and trying to take care of day-to-day business for folks. And so we all know how hard that is, and I appreciate it. And I also want to extend congratulations both to Councilor Lewis and to our state auditor, Tim Keller, for getting in the mayor's race. I think this is one where we saw people want to get back engaged in the city again, and I think it's a really exciting time to be here in this place and to be part of that process. To that end, we're looking for solutions to problems, and I wanted to highlight, and maybe I hesitate to ask Mr. Perry about this because sometimes this goes on for a minute, but I wanted to highlight and just give a chance to promote or give us an update. This week we got some good news about our SACI grants. And I know we've had a lot of discussion here at the council about that work. We've passed, Councilor Lewis and I passed some resolutions and some ordinances addressing the rape kit backlogs, and the city has worked collaboratively with some community partners to promote and support new federal SACI grants to help eliminate our backlog and prevent us from getting one again. There was a lot of discussion about whether we would get that grant and whether we had put our best foot forward there, but I want to have an opportunity, Mr. Perry, or I see Commander McDonald in the back, whose team worked on this very hard. If you could give us an update, I think we have good news. Whoever.
Mr. President, Councilor Davis, yeah, we did receive very good news. We were awarded about $2.5 million, which is a significant award. We initially applied for $3 million. It was adjusted down, and that's for the SACI grant itself. We've received an additional $400,000 for a case management software piece that will help us overall at the crime lab, including DNA. I want to basically point out too that the crime lab and its leadership over there, Commander McDonald and Marie Garcia Cunningham, who is the planning manager for APD, did a really good job in reaching out to the community, the scientific community, the grant community, the police, the Sane Nurses Association, Ms. Monahan, as well as others, to make sure that our application was competitive, that it was technically compliant. And we did that, and we got the good news that we did it right, and it will provide us a major foundation to knock out that 3,800 backlog number that is dating back to the late 1980s. And I'll leave it up to Commander McDonald if he wants to add anything else to it.
Council President, Councilor Davis. I don't think I need to add anything else. I think Mr. Perry covered everything. We're excited to get the grant. We're already had a meeting today to revise our budget. So we're going to get that into DOJ as soon as we can so we can get the funds on their way.
Mr. President, if I can just to follow up, Commander, thank you. I think your team did a good job. I know there was a lot of back and forth to get that and make our case, and I think collectively the community together made our case. And I want to point out, I think, and give your team, particularly at the lab, some credit here. They are taking on, in the place we are in the city right now, they're taking on a lot more work. And this council has added, and with initiatives, has added more to it with our property crime technicians. We saw in the paper the other day, sending more information in, more opportunities for us to catch the bad guys. But we have rape kit backlog we have to address. But we've also been trying to address that from a proactive way across this council, which is adding new tools to the crime lab to help our folks work on those issues here locally in real time with our detectives and officers, like the new NIBIN equipment to address gun violence prevention and gun crimes here in Albuquerque we added last year. Now new money for rape kit backlogs. And we need to continue to look at what it is in our funding for new positions at the crime lab to be sure we can keep up with as technology improves and the number of folks out in the field addressing those calls for service. And as we put more officers on the street, continue to ask for your recommendations to us about what you need at that lab to be sure that when we have an opportunity to catch the bad guys, your folks have all the tools they need to do it. So thank you, and we appreciate your guidance and the investment we've been making so far.
I appreciate that, and I will pass it along.
And Mr. President, Councilor Davis, I'd also like to express my appreciation to council. I mean, this was one of these things that Councilor Davis, Councilor Lewis, Councilor Gibson, I think Councilor Gibson went down to the crime lab herself and saw how things were done down there. And so, teeing off a little bit on those comments that you were all referring to, this is a really good interaction between the legislative body and the care that this council has for major policy issues, being crime victims and the like, in holding our feet as an administration to the fire and using the resources and wherewithal of this city to come up with solutions from our federal partners. So my hat goes off to you as well.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. Councilor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. President, and great job on that, the application, and congratulations on that. I think it's great news. I was very excited to hear about that. So great job to the administration and your department for putting that together. It's incredibly important. So thank you. And just a quick word, I wanted to say a quick word about the election. Just to point out that the voter turnout, I think, is something that we should all be proud of. The elections are under our ordinance, and it was obviously run very smoothly, and we had a lot of people engaged. And so I think something to say about, I guess, maybe the comments on the council and what we're doing. That was a great indicator that people are engaged in what's going on right now in our city more than in a long time. So I think that's important, for our city and for us to recognize. And also congratulations to the councilors that were re-elected. I did not get re-elected. I want to make sure everybody knows that. There will be a new councilor this year, and so I know you all will welcome that person. Thank you again. I also wanted to thank the clerk's office too. I think I don't think we all realized or appreciate at times how much that they do and how busy that they have been, and they've done an incredible job. And I've heard that things were pretty smooth in spite of long lines, and they did a really good job.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And we'll move on then to the approval of the journal.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move approval of the September 18th journal.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. There's a motion and a second to approve the September 18th journal. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Opposed, and that passes. Communications and introductions is next. Are there any changes to the letter of introduction? I do have one. I'll move that the rules be suspended for the purpose of placing R247 on tonight's agenda for final action. R247 is extending a moratorium established in R17160 for a time period of up to 9 months or until updated integrated development ordinance is made effective, whichever occurs first, on zone changes and the issuance of certain building permits for mixed-use development pursuant to the NFMXD zone within the adopted boundaries of the North 4th Street Rank 3 Corridor Plan. This requires a vote of 2/3 of the councilors present. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
And opposed? And that passes. I think I neglected to get a second on that.
Second.
There was a second, Councilor Winter. All right, thank you. And then Next is Counselor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rules be suspended for the purpose of introducing 060 and referring it to the Finance and Government Operations Committee. 060 enacts the Albuquerque Security Assistance Funding Zone Ordinance, providing for the designation of security assistance funding zones upon application to the city and all those other things contained therein. I move that the rules be suspended for the purpose of introducing 060.
There's a motion and a second for suspension of the rules for this purpose of 060. All those in favor say yes?
Yes.
Yes. Opposed? And that passes. Vice President Winter.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move approval of the letter of introduction.
There's a motion and a second from Councilor Jones for approval of the letter of introduction. All those in favor say yes?
Yes.
Yes. Opposed? That passes. We have no committee reports tonight. We'll move to deferrals and withdrawals. Councilors, any deferrals or withdrawals at this time? Councilor Gibson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to move a deferral of Committee Substitute 050, amending the City of Albuquerque Code of Ordinances, Article 6 in Chapter 13, ROA 1994, the Pawnbrokers Ordinance, adding provisions for certain buyers of precious metals and gems. I will move deferral until October 16th.
There's a motion and a second for deferral of Committee Substitute 050 until October 16th. All those in favor say yes?
Yes.
Opposed? That passes. Councilor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to move deferral of Committee Substitute 051, amending the traffic code and the municipal ordinance relating to vehicle solicitations by pedestrians. I move deferral until October 16th.
Second.
There's a motion and a second for deferral of till October 16th for Committee Substitute 051. All those in favor say yes?
Yes.
Opposed? That passes. Councilor Jones.
Thank you. I'd like to move deferral of 052, repealing the Safety in Public Places Ordinance. I move deferral until October 16th.
Second.
There's a motion and a second for a deferral of 052 until October 16th. All those in favor say yes?
Yes.
Opposed? That passes. We'll move on to item 9, consent agenda. Are there any changes to the consent agenda? Councilor Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to remove 3, EC 17360, EC 17361, and EC 17362.
All right. Any other changes, councilors? Seeing none. Vice President Winter.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move approval of the consent agenda.
There's a motion and a second for approval of the consent agenda with the 3 items removed. All those in favor say yes? Yes. Opposed? That passes. And we'll move on to EC 17350. Councilor Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is EC 17360, and we can talk about all 3 of these at once. But I have a question for the Director Chaplain on these. These are quarterly reports, and we're playing catch-up here. They start from as early as April of 2016, and they go through the calendar, end of the calendar year, December of 2016. And first of all, these, don't seem to bring us any value at this time. They're over a year old, some of these reports. And so I'm wondering why why are we getting them? What happened here?
Mr. Chaplain.
Mr. President, Councilor Gibson, we've been working with staff to get them up to speed, to get these on a timely basis. You'll notice that the balance of them will be coming in on a more regular basis. And they were, they flat didn't get it done, and so we've been working with them to get these done on a more timely basis.
So we looked this up and found out that we have a contractor who's preparing them. Looked at his contract, and this is one of the things that he does, and as well as a list of other things. And he's on contract for $40,000 plus a year. If he was responsible for doing these, also the other thing let me start here. these are like carbon copies of one another. There are a few of the statistics, numbers that have changed, but other than that, it's like boilerplate over and over again. So if he's charged in doing these, first of all, I'm not sure how we couldn't have gotten them on time, and second of all, he shouldn't be paid for things that he's not doing as part of this contract. Would you not agree?
Mr. President, Councilor Gibson, the reports are in response to items that the council specifically has asked for. And so the reports are intended to contain those elements that were requested by council, which I believe they do. And therefore, you're going to see that repetitive nature. I mean, they're not, necessarily intended to be, literally, award-winning writing. So I did talk to council staff in the past week. We are going to be working with staff and this contractor to perhaps do an executive summary and pull some of the more pertinent information forward so that they become more easy to read at that particular point in time and perhaps more relevant.
Well, I think they're easy enough to read. I'm sorry, Mr. President. They're easy enough to read. It's just that I fail to understand the necessity to have a contractor prepare these. I don't know why the program manager or someone who works with or for the program manager can't find these statistics easily enough, and there's not really that many of them, maybe a dozen that change from report to report. So, why do we keep this contract in place to have this person do this for us if, number one, they weren't being done, number two, they're boilerplate, there are only a handful of statistics that need to be changed from time to time? Why cannot the program itself or somebody working within the program who knows the program can do this?
Director Chapman.
Mr. President, Councilor Gibson, I can go back and talk to the management about why they're making this particular decision at this particular point in time, and it was an administrative decision to ask an outside contractor to help prepare that. And I can certainly relate back your concerns to the division and see what we can do differently going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chaplin, I'll just do a quick follow-up on that. Does this contractor do other work for the department?
Mr. President, I haven't looked at his contract recently, so I don't know the entire scope of services, so I couldn't fully answer that question right now.
Okay, well, I'd be interested in hearing what comes of this as well.
Sure.
Thank you. Councilor Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. President. My question to you is, it looks like there are some problems with the Early Head Start program. There has been audits that have indicated that, and now this Early Head Start program is going out for bid. Is that correct?
Mr. President, Councilor Sanchez, that is correct.
Is it because of lack of work that's been done with the department, or what's going on? Because I know the audits really indicated there was some major internal problems.
Mr. President, Councilor Sanchez, this topic has come up a couple of times with you all before, and I think perhaps it would be best suited if we schedule an appointment with you and we could sit down with our key staff and kind of walk through that so that there's a clear understanding as to what sort of triggers this RFP need, and I'd be happy to do that.
Okay, so it is going out for bid, you said, correct?
That is correct.
And has it already gone out, or it's going to be going out?
Mr. President, Councilor Sanchez, I believe it has been released.
And was that because of our lack of meeting the recommendations of the federal guidelines?
Mr. President, Councilor Sanchez, I'm not fully prepared to be able to answer that. I just haven't researched all the whys at this particular point in time, and so I'm a little bit caught unprepared to answer that question at this time.
Okay. Well, get back to me as soon as you possibly can.
Mr. President, Councilor Sanchez, I'd be happy to do that.
All right. Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Chaplin. I'll move approval of EC 17360. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say yes. Or this is receipt be noted, excuse me. Receipt be noted. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed? That passes. I'll move receipt be noted EC 17361. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say yes? Yes. Opposed? That passes. I'll move receipt be noted of EC 17362.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say yes?
Yes.
Opposed? And that passes. All right. We'll now move to general public comments. There will be a 2-minute time limit. The light on the podium will be green for the first minute and a half. Then the bell will ring and the light will turn yellow, indicating you have 30 seconds to wrap up. At 2 minutes, the light will turn red and ring to indicate that your time is up. And we'll just be calling out the next 3 speakers. And so when you hear your name, please come up to the front row here and sit so that you're on deck and you can get up after the previous speakers. So the first 3 are Pete Rezer, Don Schrader, and Simon Polakowski. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Pete Reeser from the Irving Residence Committee in District 5, and I'm here just to offer a general thank you for the work of the City Council. For the last over 2 years, we've been deliberating about the Irving project, and our councilor, Dan Lewis, has heard us through those 2 years, and on August 21st, the council passed the resolution that Dan Lewis offered, stopping the project effectively for 2 years or maybe a little more with a moratorium. And I would say that our committee put our faith in our counselor, warts and all, and in the city council, warts and all, and that faith was repaid. It may take a little while, but we engaged with this organ of government, the fix-it shop, if you will, for city governance, and we are just pleased with the outcome, even though the issue isn't settled. We were heard. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks to your group that you also came and presented to the council, to the Metropolitan Transportation Board, and that was very informative, and you were very well prepared with all your arguments, so we really appreciate that as well.
Thank you.
Next is Don Schrader, followed by Mr. Polakowski, and then Donald Clayton.
If we lived in North Korea and we heard the U.S. president with thousands of nuclear bombs at his command threaten to mass murder our nation of 25 million women, men, and children, when he spoke before the whole world at the United Nations last month, how would we feel? Talk about violent gangs and drug cartels. Talk about Hitler and Stalin. Talk about ISIS and international terrorism. How many U.S. preachers, priests, rabbis, mainstream media have the conscience and the courage to publicly damn Trump's insanely evil threats? How many in Congress have publicly damned Trump's evil words? Instead, Congress, including, sadly, both New Mexico Senators Heinrich and Udall, voted for $700 billion for the U.S. to terrorize, cripple, blind, paralyze, make homeless, and murder worldwide. Is this treating other people as we want to be treated? Is Trump, who threatened to murder 25 million people and has thousands of nuclear bombs at his command, less dangerous than the deranged Las Vegas gunman who brutally shot hundreds of people? I hate guns. I've never owned a gun, never plan to. I have paid no federal income tax for 38 years. I refuse to pay for war and nuclear bombs.
Thank you, Mr. Schrader. Next is Simon Polakowski, followed by Mr. Clayton, and then Chris Cedillo.
What I have on the overhead there is online. That is a recording of the cable board meeting, the first cable board meeting in years. This present administration failed its responsibility to the viewers of cable television and to the people of Albuquerque. Only just recently, after I believe 5 years, were 3 new cable board members selected. There is a backlog of 5 years of oversight. I personally would like a report on what's been going on these past 5 years. In fact, I mentioned that to the cable board when I went there. One of the attendees wanted to find out where the meeting was and called 311. No one knew anything. In fact, they even contacted Mr. Perry's office, and they didn't have a clue. And Mr. Perry is the chief administrative officer, and who, oversees many of the administration's responsibilities. I find this very disturbing. Councilor Gibson talks about what are these people doing for this money. Just recently, Chief grilled an administrator. Look at public access. Look at the mismanagement of public access channels by the present management team that has been in there. We have an inspector general. I believe he was in the Air Force. What was his job? Did he watch the meter run at the tank farm where the fuel was being dispensed and said, yes, the meter's working? What are these people doing? What are their responsibilities? No oversight. This is, a lack. And you talk about engaging the average citizen. Public access is where the average citizen can engage the public without money. Thank you.
Mr. Polakowski, could I ask something? You mentioned the Inspector General.
Yes.
Have you approached him in any way?
I spoke with the Inspector General a long time. He said that there has to be, I can't remember exactly, but I've been coming up here, and I believe that he comes to these meetings, and I've talked to many people who watch what's been going on at public access, and they go, it's not public access. And there's this thing called ProView. Now, they sell commercials, and that's not public access. Once you start making it a business, that's not what it was mandated to be by the FCC. So that's not counted as public access. Anyways, thank you.
Thank you. Next is Donald Clayton, followed by Chris Cedillo, and then Tad Nemiski.
R-17-233 is a bill that will eliminate 40% of the neighborhood recognition ordinance and 20% of the entire ordinance. The important issue here is that there are 100 neighborhood organizations, neighborhood associations, and not one of them has received any official notification from the ONC office whatsoever. 5 of the 100 neighborhood organizations received email notification. All of those 5 were only in Council District 2, Isaac Benton's district. No other neighborhood organizations whatsoever received a single notification. No organization received a notification in which they could even take it before their membership or their boards at every monthly meeting. No organization whatsoever had an opportunity to take it before their annual meeting. Now, I would respectfully suggest or request that this item be referred so that the people most affected, which are the neighborhood organizations themselves, the boards of the neighborhood organizations, and the membership can actually have an opportunity to review the legislation and to be informed of the legislation. Of the 5 neighborhoods in Councilor Benton's district that were notified, 3 of them complained about the fact that the information was not even available online, so they could not even review. So that leaves possibly 2 organizations that have been informed. This is an absolute travesty of the whole principle of the recognition of neighborhood associations and organizations and homeowners associations, and it makes a mockery of anything in regard to due process or democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Chris Cedillo,
Mr.
followed
President?
by Tad Nemiski.
I don't have a question for him, but I do have a comment.
Yeah.
I can say that Council President Benton was at the West Side Coalition meeting making a presentation to that organization regarding this resolution.
Yeah, you know, this has been out there for some time now, and you know, we'll hear it tonight, but yeah, I was available, and excuse me, we're not having a give and take, sir. I was available to hear this, as were the staff. So, all right, we'll move forward with Chris Cedillo, Ted Nemiski, and then finally Catherine Arndt.
Good evening, City Council. Congratulations to my opponent, Clarissa Pena. I'm thankful for a positive campaign, that we kept it professional. Thanks again to Don Harris for your win, Dan Lewis for being running up for the mayor, and to Ken Sanchez, good job on that. What I would like to also say is I want to thank the voters in District 3, 1,270 people who did vote for me. I want to let you know it was a pleasure to meet you, and I want to say thank you for your support. This was the first time I've ever ran, so this is an accomplishment to get 33% of the vote for someone who's never had any public office except for 26 years in the military. I'd like to thank the Albuquerque Journal for their endorsement and their trust in me. I'd like to thank the City Clerk's Office, Natalie Howard and her staff, for their support, their smiles every time I came and signed paperwork. They were very friendly and professional. Positive election. Sad about the only thing is the negative attacks against Tim Keller. I'm disappointed that Jeff Garrett or the Sandalina are doing that, but it's only going to enforce the voters, and they will vote for Tim Keller. The more negative they go, Tim Keller will win, and I have no doubt he will win this election. Thank you for your time. It has been a pleasure and a marathon to the last. Thank you.
Mr. Cedillo, I want to thank you and everyone else who ran, who was not successful in the election, but who put themselves out there. It takes a lot of nerve to get out there, especially that first time. I think we all remember that, so thank you for your contribution. Councilor Pena.
Yes, Mr. Cedillo, congratulations, and I do, appreciate you. You know, you're always very respectful throughout the whole process, and thank you for your service.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Next is Ted Nemiski, followed by Catherine Arndt.
Thank you. My name is Ted Nemiski. Let me begin this way. With this liberal career politician, Tim Keller, I don't care if he's watching, if he wins, nothing will change. Now, to then, take from me as friendly advice, put your money where your mouth is. That just nicely. Think about it. It is only beginning. You will be surprised. In this country, liberal country, New Mexico, sanctuary city, Albuquerque, you'll be surprised what you're getting into with him. So now, I hope you will do also, if you get there, what you're preaching. We all hear that. Again, take as positive criticism. It could be. Here is what I hear from Michelle Garcia yesterday in the morning on the radio. She slammed city with corruption. waste and abuse. Well, maybe she can find a place, some patch, Michelle, in the future. It's come to smaller employers, businesses. Yes, that was proof. How small businesses can do. Even 20 to 1 can win it yesterday. I'm talking about this pay sick leave.
Thank you. Next speaker is Catherine Arndt.
Thank you for hearing me this evening. I have a concern that it seems like, and perhaps it's just because I don't know a whole lot about how the city government operates, that not always do the departments confer with one another. That they sometimes seem to make decisions that affect a lot of people. An earlier person was talking about neighborhood associations. I never, unless I would have been looking at what was going on with the property in my neighborhood, until it came out in the paper, I would never have known anything was happening. Because the neighborhood association, if he had the information, he only shared it with people on the list, of which there are thousands of people in our neighborhood, Silver, Platinum Neighborhood Association, that are not part of it, and we had no idea. There were things we would like to have had input on, and maybe we can still do some input, but it was just very challenging. And on the neighborhood association part, I'm not going to be able to stay when you discuss that, but please make them abide by some really definite rules. Please be courageous and don't let them flummox you, because I see too much misuse in my own neighborhood, and I would really like to see it work well for the people that are there. So I thank you for your time, and have a great evening.
Catherine, may I ask you a question? So just to clarify.
Yes.
We did, pretty sure want to confirm that we did notify every neighborhood association about this bill early on. And so what you're saying is you didn't hear from your own neighborhood leadership?
No.
Okay.
We have some very challenging neighborhood leadership for the neighborhood association leadership.
Understood.
And there are people who do not have email, do not have watch TV, do not get the newspaper.
Right.
That even if he had sent out an email to everyone in the neighborhood, including people who have no idea that the neighborhood association even exists, there are a lot of people who would still have no idea. They live in apartment buildings that they don't visit with one another, kinds of things, and that concerns me also, because it's not just older folks. There's a lot of young people who have turned off a lot of devices, and there's just a lack of enough of the right kind of, just of enough communication. When neighborhood associations work well, it's awesome. But when they don't, then everyone's sort of wandering around in the dark and hoping for things, but not really counting on anything positive and that they might be interested in, if that makes any sense.
Yes, and thanks for coming down to speak, and we'll certainly take your comments into consideration when we hear the bill tonight. It is intended to just be a very small step in trying to accomplish, I think, what you're talking about. We're not revamping the neighborhood recognition ordinance, other than this kind of temporary a few rules while we try to tackle it, which is it's a big tough issue. And I will say, as a former neighborhood president myself and vice president, that we did flyers, because we went to people's doors, and there's no requirement. I mean, I guess there's some requirements about that when it comes to the annual election of officers, but otherwise, neighborhood associations aren't really required to do that, but the outreach is the big part, and everybody up here depends on their neighborhood leaderships to kind of really be the grassroots.
Well, I
help
have to say that I really wish that someone would investigate my neighborhood association, because there are things I will not talk about in public that are irregular.
All right.
And there are not enough people willing to get involved to make a change because they don't feel like it's going to matter. And so,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks. Have a good evening.
Have a
All right.
good evening.
We will move now to announcements. Councilor Davis.
There will be a Finance and Government Operations Committee meeting on Monday, October 9th at 5 p.m. in the Council Committee Room on our 9th floor.
Councilor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President. There will be a Land Use Planning and Zoning Committee meeting on Wednesday, October 11th at 5 p.m. in the Vincent E. Griego Chambers.
Thank you, Chair people. Next is public hearings. We have no public hearings tonight, and then we'll move to final actions. Councilor Jones, 056.
Thank you, Mr. President. 056 is amending Section 13533A ROA 1994 of the grant of cable television franchise ordinance to extend the expiration date by 6 months from October 1st, 2017 to April 1st, 2018. And Mr. Reardon, do you want to address this? I understand there's a renewal in place, but do we need a little time to get that completed? Or Ms. Hernandez.
Ms. Hernandez.
Mr. President and Councilor Jones, the purpose of this extension is to allow time to complete the negotiations for the cable franchise. It was set to expire October 1st. There's been a lot of preparation work and analysis that's gone into identifying the city's priorities and gathering input from the public. And now the actual negotiations need to happen. And Comcast was agreeable to this extension as well. It just ensures that there is actually a franchise agreement in place while the negotiations are completed. And we do believe that this will be enough time to complete those negotiations.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to move a due pass.
Is there a second? Second. There's a motion and a second for a due pass. Councilor Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. President. Who is this contract with? Is this currently with UPublic? No? So it's
Mr.
with
President
Comcast.
and Councilor Sanchez, this is actually the franchise agreement itself with Comcast for the provision of cable services to residents.
Okay, thank you.
We do have someone signed up to speak, Mr. Polakowski.
Yes. Again, no cable board for years. All of a sudden, 6 months, there was an attorney present there, I believe, Republican, but she don't work for peanuts. And this is going to take an extra 6 months. They had years to prepare. Public input. I went to a focus group meeting. The only reason why I found out, and I told many other people, is because it happened to be on the city government site. There were no PSAs in GovTV, which is a part of the cable channel network. I don't believe there were any PSA announcements to the public, public access channels. So I believe that there was a minimal amount of real public input into the process. Again, and that's neglect by GovTV and the public access management of the public access channels. And again, to wait all these years and 6 months, you don't do your homework the night before it's due. This is going to cost, and till April 1st, are they going to make fools out of us on April Fool's Day? This is not right. The administration has neglected its responsibilities, and this should be looked into, investigated, and why? To do everything at the last minute. And I'd even told the cable board, there's going to be a new mayor. You might all be asked to resign, and the next mayor will put in his own, recommend other people to the cable board. So to wait at the last minute, this is not the way to run government for the people. Thank you.
Polakowski. Vice President Winter.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before we go, I need to recuse myself from this vote.
All right, thank you. Vice President Winter will recuse himself from this vote. I did want to ask about something Mr. Polakowski said. Given the long time, and I agree, we said we wouldn't beat up on administration just for the sake of beating up, but I will say that these appointments have been, you know, all the progress on this has been seemingly difficult and filling out of these boards. But I did want to ask, would a new mayor just start a process with the new appointments, or would these appointments stand?
Mr. President, councilors, those appointees were appointed by the council pursuant to the ordinance, and they were appointed for a specific term, and they can't be
So they will
excused
serve their
without
term.
cause. Yes.
Yeah. So there's no way to remove anyone from these boards except under the rules of boards and commissions.
That's correct.
If somebody's not participating, et cetera. All right, thank you. Any other discussion, councilors? There's a motion and a second for 056. All those in favor say yes? Yes. Opposed? And that passes. Now we'll move to item E, R203, amending the University Neighborhood Sector Development Plan to clarify and update the regulations for SU2/DR diverse residential townhouse lot size and density. This item will be handled as a quasi-judicial matter this evening, and all those who will testify on this, please stand up and raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth?
I do.
Thank you. We will begin with an introduction of this matter by council staff. Ms. Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. President. R203 is a request for a text amendment to the University Neighborhood Sector Development Plan. It primarily does two things. First, it fixes a very clear typo related to lot width for townhouse development. And number two, it lowers the minimum lot size required for townhouse development from 6,000 square feet to 3,000 square feet. This amendment would only be applicable to properties in the diverse residential zone, which is a zoning designation called out specifically in this sector plan, for properties that abut Silver Avenue. This encompasses about 25 properties that this text amendment would be applicable to. This request is from a developer who is interested in constructing 4 townhouses with an additional unit attached to each townhouse for a total of 8 units. This type of development would not be allowed under the sector plan as it exists today. Over the summer, the EPC voted unanimously to recommend approval to the City Council for this request. There is some neighborhood opposition to this request that I believe you will hear tonight through public comment. I believe that Jim Strozier is here to speak on behalf of this request, and he can elaborate a little further as to why this request is coming through and how it will work for their particular project. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Schultz at this time? Seeing none, we will now hear from others testifying on this matter. The order and any corresponding time limits are as follows. Presentation by the applicant, 10 minutes. Public comments, 3 minutes per speaker. Rebuttal by the applicant, 2 minutes. Comments by planning department, if any, and deliberation and discussion by the councilors, at which time we can call upon any speaker with questions or clarifications. So we'll get started with the 10 minutes for the applicant. Mr. Strozier.
Yes, thank you. Mr. President, councilors, my name is Jim Strozier, principal with Consensus Planning. It's a pleasure to be before you this evening talking about this text amendment. I'll be brief. Originally, we requested that this amendment apply to all of the DR properties within the sector plan, which would have affected over 600 properties. We think that this is an appropriate change to the DR zone because what it would do is it basically allows similar density to what is allowed within the existing DR zone, but it allows it to take place in a different way. And basically, it is to take what is allowed currently for townhouse lots and allow those individual townhouses to have a secondary dwelling unit. And we thought, even though this came to light as a result of a particular project, we went to the zoning administrator, zoning hearing examiner, and asked for a variance. The zoning hearing examiner said, you make some really valid points related to your request, but a variance isn't the appropriate way to do it. That he felt that his hands were tied and he didn't have the ability to approve our request as a variance specific to this project. We felt that this was appropriate and should be considered. We met with planning staff. We looked at different alternatives as to ways to move this forward. And we settled on this idea of doing a text amendment with what we felt was a minor change to the DR zone. So planning staff reviewed our request. We went back and forth. They made some suggestions as to some alternative language. We agreed with those suggestions. There was a hearing held before the Environmental Planning Commission. All of the property owners that were affected by this proposed text amendment were notified of this change. We had a hearing at the EPC, and the EPC recommended unanimously to recommend this text amendment. When we came before the LUPS committee at the first meeting before that, the city councilors, as part of that committee, expressed some concern over the fact that this was going to impact over 600 properties and asked us to go back and look at our request and see if there was a way to pare it down, to be more specific. And so we got together with council staff and we looked at different ways to do that. And what we came up with was, I think, pretty unique and appropriate way to address this. And that was to focus in on the Silver Avenue Bicycle Boulevard. And our project was located on Silver Avenue, and we made some specific design modifications and really worked hard to try and address the fact that Silver Avenue is a resource in our community that the city has spent a lot of time and effort to make some changes to that, and we felt that this change was appropriate along that corridor. And by reducing it and limiting the change to only those DR properties that abut Silver Avenue, we went from over 600 properties to 25. Seemed like a pretty good paring down. And also really seems to be appropriate. And, you know, thinking about properties that are near the University of New Mexico, near Central Avenue, whether you like or dislike the ART project, certainly our highest in use transit corridor in our community, and directly along Silver Avenue, the Bicycle Boulevard, we felt that this was appropriate. So with that, I would respectfully request that this body consider our amendment as modified, and once again allow secondary dwelling units as part of a townhouse for those DR zone properties adjacent to the Silver Avenue Bicycle Boulevard. I want to thank council staff, Mr. Melendres and Ms. Schultz, for their work on this. I think they may have some suggestions as to simplify the language even more in this text amendment, which I've reviewed and I agree with. And then I also want to thank the planning department staff, zoning and planning staff that I met with originally about how to get this project move forward, and the EPC for their consideration and deliberation on this matter. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time, and I know I have some rebuttal at the end, and I don't need to use all my time. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Strozier. Any questions for Mr. Strozier at this time? Councilor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to clarify, Mr. Strozier, remind me, in the proposed development here, what is the final density expected with these townhouses with SDUs?
So it ends up being, I believe it's just under the 30 DUs to an acre that's allowed under the zoning. So the DR zone allows single-family detached houses, it allows attached townhouses, and it allows apartments.
The maximum density allowed within that zone is 30 DUs to the acre, and we would not go above that with this request.
And Mr. President, Mr. Strozier, clarify for me, or Ms. Schultz, perhaps, just to clarify, I'm reminded, but I'm thinking back to the record here. The current sector plan does allow detached townhomes as long as the lot maintains under that density limit, and this would conform to that principle, although we're sort of redefining a little bit.
So if, I'll take a stab at it.
Yeah.
Ms. Schultz can add on as necessary. So the critical part is that under the current regulations, a townhouse lot is allowed to be 24 feet wide.
Yep.
But it has a provision that it requires 24 feet per dwelling unit.
Yep.
So if you were to add a secondary dwelling unit, as we've proposed, our lots are 34 feet wide, you would have to have lots that are 48 feet wide. And so that's what we were trying to address specifically with this amendment.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. President.
Any other questions for Mr. Strozier? Okay, we'll move on then to public comments. Each speaker will get 3 minutes, so the bell will ring when you have a half a minute left. So we'll get started. Come on up to the front when you hear your name and sit in front row. Tad Nemiski is the first speaker, followed by Julie Kidder, followed by Ryan Sindon.
Excuse me. My name is Tad Niemiecki. I'm speaking, I'm looking as builder, residential, commercial, future of course, but I was contractor for many years, over half century. So anyway, most of you don't know what contractor these days, construction contractor has to go through, professional people. Roofer has to be licensed, plumber, painter, etc., driver, and so on. So you are politician, created own monster right here, by the creating rules and regulation. Why don't you let it professional people being involved in the process, rebuilding or changing neighborhoods? I'm speaking about you and them neighborhoods and other neighborhoods in the future. Well, what is appropriate, what is not appropriate? Yes, time is changing. And I'm looking both sides, as owner and as builder. So, anyway, it is a lot to think about it, you know. Where we were, where are we going, where we were, where we are, and where are we going. And analyze and value all these 3 areas. Thank you.
Next is Ms. Kidder, followed by Ryan Sindon, followed by Don Hancock.
Good evening. My name is Julie Kidder. I am the president of the University Heights Neighborhood Association. I have lived in the neighborhood since 2009, and until 2015, I lived immediately adjacent to the property in question. The current plan for this property, as proposed by the applicant, has gone through numerous variance applications through the zoning hearing administrator, and those variance requests, some of which were approved, some of which were not, in combination did not allow the applicant to build the development that they desired. So in finding that, they went to the next option that they felt they had, which was to do a text amendment. Well, we appreciate the changes to the initial text amendment that affected 600 DR properties in 3 different neighborhood associations. we do not support the amendment as a neighborhood association. The townhouses, single units on one small townhouse lot, have been created in the neighborhood for decades without an issue. Having duplexes, 2 units on the same small lot that can be sold individually, is not, we feel, appropriate for the neighborhood, and it conflicts with our sector plan. Allowing this text amendment through essentially creates spot zoning, since a number of the properties do currently have houses, and with the IDO coming through, that would essentially then eliminate further properties from taking advantage of the text amendment. So essentially, this should have just been an SU zoning if this is what the applicant was trying to pass forward. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next is Ryan, and then followed by Don Hancock.
Hello, thank you for hearing me today. Just to establish myself, I'm a UNM student. I live in the neighborhood. I'm also from Venice, California, which is technically the most gentrified neighborhood in the United States. And this move is a move towards gentrification. And gentrification stifles student success. We don't need to raise prices in this neighborhood for students to be successful. If we want our UNM students to get good grades, we shouldn't be putting more economic burden on them. This city kind of has a trend to move towards development, and I don't think this city is the field of dreams. If we build it, I don't know if people are going to come just because we build it. We need to focus on our ethos as it is, and now the character of the neighborhood is in jeopardy, and we shouldn't jeopardize the character of our neighborhoods because a few people want to profit, like plumbers and electricians. It's about students profiting in their education in this neighborhood and not the individual. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hancock.
Good evening, councilors. I'm Don Hancock from the University Heights Association. I've lived in the neighborhood for more than 40 years, was involved in the sector plan development. It's not been shown that this text amendment is necessary. There are 12 other townhouses that have been developed within 3 blocks of this property using the existing zoning requirements, so you can do townhouses. This single project is the only one in all of these years that says they can't meet the requirements. They should be able to meet the requirements, and if not, there shouldn't be special exceptions for them. Their current proposal doesn't meet the lot size requirement, doesn't meet the setbacks, front or rear, doesn't meet off-street parking requirements. So they're trying to change a lot of things in essence. It also, on March 20th of this year, you as the council adopted a new comprehensive plan. This proposal is not consistent with the comprehensive plan, which sets up areas of change and areas of consistency. This area that this development would be in is an area of consistency. So you are doing something that, from our view, is contrary to the comp plan. From a neighborhood standpoint, and I think not just our neighborhood, but lots of neighborhoods, it sends a really bad message when you adopt a new comprehensive plan and one of the first things you do in terms of zoning is do something that's not consistent with it. Why should exceptions be made to one project when other projects, other developers have been able to work with the sector plan without variances and to approve good developments? Also, as has been mentioned, the IDO is not in effect yet, but the IDO that's before you would also not allow this particular project, which doesn't meet either the lot width requirements or the front and rear setback requirements of the IDO. So as was mentioned, in essence, if you approve this, you are approving a project for one project different than anything that's been done for 35 years and different than anything that would be done under the IDO if the IDO stays as it's before you, has been through the EPC and is before you. So we would request that you turn down this request and leave the existing DR zoning in place. Thank you.
I have a question, Mr. Hancock. Roughly when was the last townhouse built in that area?
The most recent townhouses are on the 200 block of Vassar, which is about 3 blocks away, and they were built approximately 5 or 6 years ago.
Thanks. Thank you.
Mr. Hancock.
Sorry, Councilor Davis.
Just to remind me just a minute on the history, because I know this is important and we've talked about this. Silver Avenue is sort of the piece here, and the neighborhood association, I appreciate, has been working with the developer and Mr. Strozier to come up with as close as we can to a compromise that makes everybody happy. But if I'm just living in the neighborhood, I know a lot's changed on Silver Avenue and what we've done since the sector plan was adopted. What, if anything, in your opinion, has changed about Silver well, let me say this. Under the current plan, this lot or this project could be a multi-story, high-density apartment building without any variance at all, is my understanding. Is that right?
It could be, the 2 lots could be an 8-unit apartment house. The proposal is 8 units. The 8 apartment units could not be more dense than what they're proposing because they're going as dense as they can be. So Silver has changed and not changed. One of the things, and we want to formally appreciate your work, Councilor Davis, in terms of funding for the roundabouts and some improvements that have been made on Silver Avenue within the last year.
And that was y'all's recommendation.
Thank you. Yes, the Neighborhood Association asked you for it, and we very much appreciate you working with us and the Nob Hill Association that was also affected to do this. Silver is important because, to remind you, we're one of the few neighborhoods in the city that you have an arterial on the north, a bike boulevard, and then 2 more arterials, lead and coal, on the south side. So Silver is really the only east-west street, not only for slow traffic, low-density traffic to get people across to and from UNM and the Central Avenue businesses. So we've tried for many years to protect Silver as a bicycle, pedestrian, residential kind of area. So it's not that we're opposed to residential development. This particular project, though, it's self-imposed. The lot width requirement is self-imposed. They took 2 existing normal lots and cut them into 4. That's where the problem came. The Neighborhood Association was willing to support that and support variances for each of those 4 small lots to be like all the other small lots in the neighborhood that have been done, put a single townhouse on it. That was actually approved. It was the developer that then decided, after they wanted it, that they didn't want it, and they've gone to this other plan. So we're disappointed that what we thought was a good solution more than 3 years ago, that the neighborhood supported and the developer now has decided they don't want to proceed with that, and instead they want to change the DR zoning.
Thanks, Don. Thank you, Mr. Hancock. Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that concludes the public comments. We'll move to rebuttal by the applicant. Mr. Strozier, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President, councilors. Just real quick, I'll go try and hit some points here. So this project, we did go through a lot of design issues and trying to figure out a way to get rear parking, and so we didn't limited the number of curb cuts, utilized the existing alleyway. We wanted to change the way that these buildings related to the street, and we did ask for a front yard and a rear yard variance, which were approved in order to accommodate that. And I think that's really appropriate in this situation. We also tried to figure out a unique product for this area. And it was interesting, the comments about gentrification and the impact to students, because what the rules presently allow is for us to take these 4 lots and build 4 townhomes. I don't see how that really positively impacts the student population and student needs in the area. What we've proposed with this amendment is to allow secondary dwelling units in each of those, which would in effect create a small for-rent apartment in each of those townhouses. Now, I would also point out that doesn't necessarily change the size of the buildings, because The parking for this particular sector plan in this particular zone is based on square footage, not on bedrooms, not on bathrooms, not on dwelling units. There's a dwelling unit component, but really what it comes down to is the square footage. In terms of need, once again, this was reviewed and recommended by planning and zoning staff and unanimously recommended by the EPC. I think in terms of the consistency, this is a project that doesn't change the density of the zone or the parking requirements for the zone. And with the changes that I think staff has recommended, I think it simplifies that even more. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Mr. Stroger, I do have a question. With regard to the comparison with 4 conventional townhouses under the zone, because of the whatever the every site has its restrictions, but with those restrictions, and with this is somewhat of an opinion, but that I'm asking of you, but with those restrictions, and with just the economics of this thing, I mean, would the 4 townhouses in that kind of situation likely be larger, smaller, in terms of their square footage, more or less expensive, that sort of thing?
Mr. President, I think that in terms of the amount of the parking square footage dynamic exists in this zone. So I don't think that without this amendment, I think the size of the proposed townhomes would basically be the same square footage as is proposed with the apartments, with the townhouse and the apartment.
Combined.
Combined.
Yeah.
It would probably be the same. Now, in terms of price point, I think that that's outside of my bailiwick. I know that part of the thought process, and we did meet with some realtors that are familiar with the area when we were trying to come up with a unique product. We felt this site deserved something unique and creative. And they felt that, having secondary dwelling units as an approved use within a project like this would be a benefit in terms of helping somebody qualify for a mortgage, in that you've got a legal rentable apartment as part of that, and that because it's near the university, there's certainly a need for those types of units and that type of product in this area. So that's really where we kind of came down to trying to figure out how to best do that. This property has been looked at for an 8-unit apartment project. My client didn't want to do that. He thought this was better.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Are there any comments by the planning department? Okay, there aren't any.
Mr. President, if I may just offer that we received an email from planning earlier indicating that they didn't have any concerns and they were supportive of the proposal as being presented to the council this evening.
All right, so just simply that they're generally supportive. Okay. So that opens it to the council for deliberation and discussion.
Mr. President.
Councilor Davis.
I believe we have one amendment that I'm going to move as amendment number 1, which is the technical cleanup amendment to the LUPS amendment that was out of committee. And I'm going to ask Ms. Schultz if she would to just explain that technical amendment. It's in our iPads, but just for the record.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President and Councilor Davis. This is an amendment to an amendment, technically, fixing some of the language in the committee amendment that was passed at the LUPS hearing that moved this item out to full council. And it simply clarifies that while some of the dimensional standards are being reduced, such as the required lot size from 6,000 to 3,000 square feet, that you still have to comply with everything else that the diverse residential zone calls for, such as parking or the floor to area ratio, that just because we're making a change to one dimensional standard, that doesn't make you exempt from having to comply with the rest of them.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. President, I move floor amendment number 1.
There's a motion and a second for floor amendment number 1. Any discussion on the amendment? All those in favor say yes. Yes. Opposed? And that passes. Any other deliberation or discussion, councilors?
Mr. President.
Councilor Davis.
Since this is in our district and I know it well, the neighborhood at least, I've been following this well. I have to say, this has been a project that's been 3-4 years, I think, in the record and development, as we've heard, through various through variances and different hearings to try to find a solution for this property that's long plagued this neighborhood. And we have, as Mr. Hancock noted, from the Neighborhood Association, invested a lot, from Councilor Garduno to myself, in helping to build up both the area around Silver and Harvard and others to make it a real, not just a destination for students, as some of our commenters mentioned tonight, but also a place that residents have a sense of identity again for that neighborhood. And I think it's incredibly important that we listen to them. And although I do believe this item will probably pass tonight to allow this to go forward, I think right now it's important that we take a moment and I defer to our neighborhood associations in places like this where they have worked so hard to work on these pieces. And so while I expect it will pass, I just want to say tonight I would, having reviewed the record, believe the Neighborhood Association has made a strong case for maintaining a strong record for denying this based on the fact that this is sort of a special project and not necessary to comply with the way that we've done work in the rest of the neighborhood.
All right, thank you, Councilor Davis. Any other discussion from the council? If not, is there a motion?
I make a motion to approve.
So that's a motion for a due pass as amended. There's a second. All those in favor say yes. Yes. Opposed?
No.
And that passes on a 5-2 vote. All right, next is item F, R233. This is establishing that no new recognized or non-recognized neighborhood associations shall be created under the existing neighborhood association recognition ordinance unless in compliance with certain interim procedures while the neighborhood association recognition ordinance is updated. I move a due pass. There's a motion and a second. We do have an amendment, but I'll talk about the bill in general first and then the amendment. So first of all, we have an existing neighborhood recognition ordinance. This doesn't change it, but it does acknowledge that that we're working on that ordinance, that we intend to work on that ordinance. The interim procedures that we're talking about during the time that we are discussing are very simple, just three. One is that no new association shall overlap with any existing association. So this doesn't change any existing association unless there's some desire, if there were to be a desire to put a newer association to overlap an existing association, that would not be allowed during the interim. The second provision is that should a proposed new association or a proposed boundary expansion for an existing association contain an area that overlaps with the boundaries of an association that was previously active within the last 12 months, the inactive association has an opportunity to reinstate their status before the proposed new association or boundary expansion would be approved. So this is addressing a condition that occurred in the recent past where an association for various reasons became inactive for a short period and then they were confusion ensued. The third and last provision is that any new association must adopt bylaws that in their entirety promote an inclusive, democratic, and representative association. So those are the only three provisions. This bill does not impact homeowner associations. It does not impact existing associations as they are currently configured, and it does not amend the neighborhood recognition ordinance. It's an interim measure. We do have a floor amendment, and that's in your packet. That amends the first interim procedure, that's the no new association shall overlap, to also prohibit the expansion of an existing association's boundaries. in the instance where it would overlap with another association. So if you already have your association, you're fine, but if you were to try to overlap another association's boundary, that would be, in the interim, not be allowed. So that's the floor amendment. So I will move floor amendment number 1 to R233. There's a motion and a second for the floor amendment. Any further discussion on that? That was a technical correction, I believe, Ms. Mancini. All those in favor say yes?
Yes.
Yes. Opposed? And that passes. Mr. Zaman.
Mr. President, if you'd allow me to jump in right now and sort of correct the impression that may have been left by an earlier speaker. I just wanted to confirm for the council that the outreach on this bill has been, I believe, comprehensive. Councilor Benton's office, with the assistance of ONC, sent an email describing the bill and outlining what it does to the 256 registered neighborhood associations in the city. That's more than 500 people that were directly notified by email. In addition to that, I know the sponsor has attended, as Councilor Sanchez pointed out. The sponsor has attended and presented this bill at the West Side Coalition of Neighborhood Associations. The ONC, various staff have gone to the District 4 Coalition, the District 7 Coalition, and any number of leadership associations and individual neighborhood associations. So we believe that we have done just about as good a job as we could in letting the neighborhoods know that this is coming.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that, Mr. Zaman. As was said, you know, I had a discussion with some of the leadership at the West Side Coalition. They had questions, discussed it over the phone, and was invited to come out and present it. And of course, anyone who had requested such a presentation, I would have been happy to discuss it with. But again, it's a very simple ordinance. Once it was heard by the West Side Coalition, there didn't seem to be some more comfort in it. But the fact is, this is a very limited, short-term, interim set of rules that really, these are the kind of basic democratic operations that we would expect of any organization that's sanctioned by the city. But we're just kind of really clarifying existing rules, I think, more than anything. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Mancini.
Councilor President, councilors, no, that's correct. It really is attempting to address some of the deficiencies that we have in our current ordinance so that it gives us the time to invite the public into a public process to amend the ordinance more permanently.
Councilor Harris.
Yes, and I actually, for better or for worse, I think I'm probably responsible for the overlapping neighborhood association provision. Let me tell you how that came up. I introduced a bill because there are some neighborhoods in my area where there was a small group of people who were sort of running things, and they were not actually listening to the broader, consensus of the neighborhood. In fact, they were using rules to kind of artificially stay in power and to try to drive certain policies. And I initially introduced a bill that would require democratic governance of neighborhood associations and some sort of showing that, when they came up with recommendations and so forth, that they were actually using some sort of democratic process, and they weren't using bylaws in kind of a manipulative way to use committees and so forth to just sort of keep the same people there. And when there's a lot of other people and other viewpoints within the neighborhood, and when I suggested some sort of requirement for a democratic process, the neighborhood associations at that point really objected. So I thought, well, another way to do this is just allow overlapping neighborhoods, because then if you have some people who have one association and you have other people who have different ideas, they can just form their own association. Then the council and the people in the neighborhood have a choice of where to go. So I think this would be fine as long as there was some sort of guarantees that the neighborhood association, if there's only going to be one association in the area, it really has to be inclusive and democratic. So that would be my concern. And I'm also asking the sponsor to let me know what are the problems that have occurred in the last several years with the overlapping situation.
Sure. So I'll give those in just a second, but Yeah, to clarify, this does express the council's intent to look at the neighborhood recognition ordinance, and that will be a public process. These hearings are a public process, but that would be a more lengthy one, obviously, because of all the concerns of various neighborhoods. And let me point out, we do have a few people sign up to speak that we need to hear from. But I do want to point out that we do say that this also has a sunset. This interim measure has a sunset of January 1st of 2019, so just a little over a year. This would sunset unless we have already amended the recognition ordinance prior to that. So recent examples of undemocratic bylaws. Well, first, a recent example of a neighborhood attempting to absorb another neighborhood which had recently failed to renew their certification. So there was a long-standing neighborhood, many, many years, as long as I know, had been in existence. For a short time, they did not renew their paperwork, and another organization attempted to expand its boundaries and absorb that whole area. So that was one example. We've recently had another example of just undemocratic bylaws in a new association that was formed. In those bylaws, this is an example. The president may change bylaws at any time and to any degree without the approval from another party. The president may consider the results of a vote of the general membership before taking action, but is not bound by that vote. So, you know, it would appear that these would be common sense things that you would not do if you're interested in democratic government of your neighborhood, but they did occur. So this is what this is about. It's very short term. It does illustrate the need for us to take a look at the narrow again. And I think that's very important to say. But those are some examples of the difficulty. But let's go ahead and move to public comment. We do have 3 people signed up to speak. Mr. Clayton, who seems to have left. Sally Moon and Catherine Arndt, I think, also spoke and has already left. So that leaves Sally Moon. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. President and councilors. I'm Sally Moon. I have 2 businesses in Old Town. I'm the president of the Old Town Merchants Association. And I thank you for this opportunity to speak my mind here. I first commend President Councilman Benton for creating this and proposing this, because it's very much needed. Last Wednesday, September 22nd, we had a facilitated meeting with the City of Albuquerque Cultural Services, Neighborhood Liaison, and the Legal Department. And in that, this was to facilitate some communication between the new organization and the presiding organizations, OTMA we call ours, the Landlord Association, Landlord and Owners, and the West Side Neighborhood Associations. And the particular person that has created all this hasn't showed up for the last 2 meetings. Well, what we did learn in the meeting from legal and from, I guess, cultural services, that there's no difference between being a recognized organization and a non-recognized organization. And what has happened when this person got he referred to some of the bylaws there, got this, has made himself mayor of Old Town. And he has done many things, including accosting me and throwing me out of a public an event. And what I'm trying to get to, and what I prefer to say, is when you do look at these rules and organizations, if there's no difference between recognized and non-recognized, take it off. Appreciate it. Thank you for your consideration.
Ms. Moon. Thanks for giving us that perspective. And if you recall, Ms. Arndt was talking about her experience with a different organization where their concerns about the leadership. So it's really, we're not trying to get down in the weeds of those interpersonal relationships. We're just, you know, looking for, at least during the period that we're just recently this year have taken over the Office of Neighborhood Coordination, and Ms. Mancini's doing a great job. We really appreciate her work. But we've got some work ahead of us to try to just make our expectations very clear. I think that's all we're really looking to do, both with this, but then as we deliberate the recognition ordinance. Councilor Gibson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I guess I have a question about the ordinance that's being worked on. Obviously, there are things that, you know, we wouldn't want to see in bylaws. There are a couple examples the President just gave us. Is there going to be an approval or a review process built into the ordinance? Or is there, I don't think there's one there now. I think that's kind of what happened. So will your department be looking at these and approving them or giving some certification or recognition?
Ms. Mancini.
Council President, Councilor Gibson, I think it's really too early to say what the ordinance could look like. That's why we want to have that public process, is to really hear from our neighborhood association leaders who are on the ground, and to have that kind of back and forth conversation of what's going to work, what's not going to work. We don't want to create more problems, that's for sure. So I think we want to be very sensitive to any unintended consequences. So I'm not sure I can really answer that at this time, but that's definitely something that needs to be considered.
Thank you.
All right. Any other comments? Councilor Pena, excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, I agree. I actually think that, you know, we really do need to look at the ordinance. But in terms of this, can you kind of give me, is there anything that this would change in terms of what's happening now with some of the examples that you gave with some of the neighborhood associations?
I'll ask Ms. Mancini. I think any association that is an association in good standing, if they were not intending to either A, expand their boundaries, or help me out here, expand their boundaries, or to create a new association, that's where this would be triggered.
Council President, that's correct. So any organization as it's currently configured, or association as it's currently configured, would not be affected by this resolution. It would affect any new association that hasn't gotten organized yet. It would affect any current association that would want to amend their boundaries and expand their boundaries and overlap with another association. And another way that it could affect a current association is if they wanted to amend their bylaws to be undemocratic and uninclusive.
Okay, Mr. President, I appreciate that. I just want to make sure that we're not getting in the weeds in terms of any dispute that's out there currently.
Council President, Councilor, no ma'am, that would, it doesn't retroactively affect any association that's currently on the ground.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? All right, it's been moved and seconded, and it's been amended. So all those in favor of R233, please say yes. Yes. Opposed? And that passes. And we'll move to R247. This is extending the moratorium established by R17-160 for the NFMXD zone in the North 4th Street Rank 3 corridor plan. And councilors, our timing on this is somewhat difficult because we're right in the middle of we're very close to having the IDO coming before the council. And I think many of the concerns that were brought up during this, when we did establish this moratorium, this short-term moratorium, it did acknowledge that we were in the midst of the IDO and had this is a result of community concerns about some specific types of development on the North 4th Street quarter plan. And this would simply, I think what we're hoping to do, and Ms. Schultz, I'll ask you to describe that briefly, is to use kind of the direction that we're going with the IDO with regard to some of these larger buildings and their articulation and landscaping and so forth. So, Ms. Schultz.
Mr. President, yes, that's correct. The original moratorium, which this council adopted back in March of this year, also adopted interim design guidelines that were taken from the draft of the Integrated Development Ordinance. Those interim design guidelines, as they exist in the IDO today, have evolved a little bit after the recent LUPS hearing, so we're swapping out the original interim design guidelines with the new ones as they exist in the IDO after the recent amendments that have passed. So this bill does the same exact thing that it did last March. It just extends it for a period of 9 months, or when the IDO is adopted, whichever happens first.
All right, thanks for that summary. Any questions or comments, councilors? I appreciate the council having supported this previously. I always hate to extend it a moratorium, but the expectation this would be for a fairly short period here, and it would be consistent with the direction we're going with the IDO. I'll move I do pass. There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Opposed? And that passes. And there being no further business, the city council meeting is adjourned.